question is whether, I mean, in medical terms, they use the phrase informed consent, I believe. When you're about to have an operation, you have to understand what's about to happen because you may well lose your life. Now, I'm not suggesting it's quite life-threatening in this case, but it is likely to change someone's life to have cameras in there for 6 months and then be the centre of attention in this way. Now, what I'm asking is, can anyone possibly make an informed decision and give their informed consent to such a terrible process, or a potentially terrible process, and what really do you tell them that is going to help them to make that decision?
Well, I won't bore you with the preamble that I go through, because it's a long and convoluted process, and it's, I think, very precise. But take it from me, they were told, time and time and time again. We would turn up at unexpected times. We would film rows. We would film sentimental moments. We would film emotional moments. We would film the dross of daily life. We would film the ups and the downs. We would intrude into their life at most times that we felt was relevant to the better portrayal of that family, their ideas and their actions. We told them that time and time again. We told them there was no money in it. We told them they weren't doing it for fame and fortune. I've even seen the phrase repeated in the press, said by Laurie. And it was of great concern to him just how much money was being offered for this, because a rumour went flying around that they were going to make a fortune. It was only very late in the day that I was able to put that right and put them back on track, because they thought they were going to make a great deal of money. These are documentaries. They're not soap. They're somewhere moving out of documentary. They're important documentaries because they're moving on the social realism documentary. There's no social realism in the sense of grim and grime. It's a very different form of realism, but they are highlighted, edited editions of the lives that they have been through.
Well, let me take you up on that, because I think that's another, we should move on to that. I also make films for a living, not quite documentary films, but I must say, not professionally very happy with the way that those films were edited. They shocked me in the techniques that were used. I understood that you were fairly open about the fact that they were edited as soap. They juxtapose short bits of action, not necessarily in the same place or at the same time, and they do it, as far as I can see, to highlight drama and to highlight conflict. Now, is that an acceptable way to treat real people in a real-life situation when you are also claiming that it is a real-life piece of television?
They're there and cut in that way in order to highlight understanding.
But to highlight conflict as well.
Conflict and all the other elements that take part of our human responses to life. You know, there are newspapers that say all human life is there. They show everything from the sleaze to the glitter right across. Somewhere in between those two are all these elements in this family. And you cut them in such a way as people recognize them, people see them for what they are. We do not put a single word into anyone's mouth. We do not tell people how to act. We do not tell people when to say it, what to do. We don't say, come in through the door, kick the cat, snarl at the camera, and go and smack Michael. We don't say any of those things. We say we will be around. People know the cameras are there. They're not hidden in the walls. If the techniques upset you, then maybe it's time you looked at your techniques for editing. We have to move on. Things are moving on. This is a highlighted form of what we did 18 years ago. I had no wish to replicate what we did 18 years ago.
But these are
We've
real
learned
people
new techniques.
and real people's lives that you're playing with. And look, may I just...
I'm not playing with anyone's life, Paul.
Let me just show you...
This is very serious.
Perhaps I could play back to you one of the scenes that comes from your own... I think it's from episode 2. And I mean, it seems to me that in real-life television, you should allow the audience to make up their own minds what they think of people. And there is an episode that you cut, which is the baby and Lateline having her hair done, and you cut it against each other.
Yeah.
So we've got a name for him?
Kane.
Kane Alex. Hey.
I can't believe it.
Remember that they are.
Oh my God, look at that.
Oh my God. Harry, dear. Show your money.
Now, isn't there something about that which makes it very hard for people not to understand what message they're being asked to get? I mean, to make up their own minds about that particular piece of footage?
What's wrong with it, Paul?
Well, I think it's pretty obvious that you're being asked to think ill of Nolene, to think of her as a heartless...
Why?
Because she is concerned entirely with her appearance. Her daughter-in-law is having a child, and at the very moment, supposedly, when her daughter-in-law is having a child, her grandchild, she is sitting in a hairdressing salon talking only about how she looks. It portrays her, in my view, as heartless. Now, do you not think that's true?
Paul, where was she when the baby was being born?
Well, I don't know. But why would you expect her to be there anyway?
Was she beside because she wanted to take a great hand in it, and Paul had actually pushed her away and said, "We'll have the baby our way." She wasn't at the birth. When she arrived, in a brand new blue suit with special champagne, rather better than the one they'd already got. If you look at the expression on her face when they already told her they've got one, we're looking at very subtle signs here, and the cutting of that is not unkind. The cutting of that is helpful in a better understanding of the relationships between those two groups. Nothing wrong with it at all.
But it telegraphs it, doesn't it? I mean, it says, don't miss this. Don't
Well,
miss
what do you
we're
want to
trying
do?
to say
Send
here.
misinformation? Would you want to send misinformation?
Well, I think it would be more honest and fairer, particularly since they're real people.
What is...
Well, they're
what do you
real
mean more
people.
honest?
They're real people's
You're
lives.
making an assumption. Paul, you're making an assumption. You're taking a position and you're making an assumption. It's your interpretation you're revealing, your prejudice, your bias, not mine.
I'm taking a position that somewhat reflects the views of the star of the program, the series of programs that you have invested a lot of time and no doubt money in, and on which your reputation depends. Now, can I actually read?
My reputation doesn't depend on films. I make films for what they are. We come up with what they are. If the public takes them, fine. If they don't take them, they still exist in their own right.
The producer of The American Family, Craig Gilbert, said, to invoke a harsh but accurate word, we are exploiting them to make our films, and no matter how sensitive, caring or understanding we may be, the fact that our careers often depend on our ability to conceal the truth of this exploitation from our subjects. Do you think that's completely untrue?
There's elements of truth in that, but for him, I'm sure it's the full truth.
And not for you?
No. We exploit each other all day, every day, whether there's camera around or not. People get rich, people stay poor. People make success, people make a bog of life. Exploitation is there. It is my job to somehow disassociate myself from life. There was a tiny clip when you said in your introduction, you heard me saying, a documentary filmmaker has to be a bastard. I actually went on to say that you have to disassociate yourself. You have to be a chameleon. You have to absorb yourself into the life. You have to be there making assessments. You have to forget your own bigotry. You have to forget your own bias. You have to forget your own life. And boy, have I made a mess of my own life, because I've been more involved in watching and trying to understand other people's lives. But I'm not exploiting, except in that we don't pay people very much money because we call it documentaries. We should pay more. We don't have it. Documentaries don't have the budgets, as you well know. But I am actually, in the end, trying to give a view on contemporary society focused through particular people. Not large canvases, but well-focused, smaller canvases that I think better illustrate what's going on around us.
If I came to you tomorrow and said, I'd like to spend 6 months in your house and make a film and have total control over the editing, what would you say to me?
I wouldn't let you do it until, now don't cut me, until I get to know you better.
Paul Watson, thank you very much for your time. Thank you for answering your critics.